Okay. I can turn this off here for now. Are you testing it? All right, you guys test it. So, and then we got Ken Pazder coming in at 10:30. He's a lawyer, real estate lawyer for Century 21. Really great guy. He kind of enlightened me on a lot of found stuff. He's going to talk to us a little bit about the new things coming up. You know, the rescission, all that. We've kind of went through a lot of that, but he'll talk a little bit more about that. What I just wanted to say, nothing much. We all know the market is what it is. There are all kinds of news broadcasts out there about different things, but from my point of view, I kind of remain cautiously optimistic. And what I mean by that is that interest rates are kind of holding a little bit. They'll probably go up a little bit more, but generally speaking, they're kind of at the higher end of where they're going to probably end up. Might be a half point or a quarter point more, but we're probably pretty close there. I think that inflation is coming in line, and that'll kind of give everybody a little bit there. We've got the spring market coming. I'm hearing a lot of chatter from my end. I'm talking to the guys here, Sonny and everybody, and we're getting a lot of interest in the market. I know that I just was hanging out with the guys from Concord, and they had seven deals in the go on Sunday, and they're all $1.6 million, $1.7 million, and they were got to get dad's approval, got to get this, that kind of thing. So they're in the works and they're working on them. So it's a good sign, and I think that your open houses are picking up a little bit. I heard a couple of multiple offers, that kind of thing going on. What's that? Lots of multiple offers. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Yeah. So it's good because we'll have to kind of get back to the multiple offer thing. We'll have a little seminar on that, how to deal with them. And a lot of you have already kind of dealt with that before, so you kind of know what's going on. So basically speaking, things are looking good, but I think we still have to consider that we've got to work smart. And a couple of things that I found when working with the new realtors is that you want to utilize what we already have at Century 21. We have a really good program. The C21 Engage, for example, has campaigns and email tracking, so you can tell when your people are. Can you guys not see me over here?
You got the camera has to see.
Oh, right. Sorry. Hi, everybody at home. Good to see you again. So going back to what we have already in our toolboxes is C21 Engage, and I found that it has email tracking. So when you send somebody an email, you can tell whether they open it, and if you had an attachment to that, tell it if they open the attachment. So why pay for MailChimp or Constant Contact or one of those, $30 a month, whatever that is? You use the C21 Engage because it also has a campaign with it. So you can automatically send out your emails with whatever you want. And so you can do an attachment. You can do something from Ken Pazder that we're doing today, pick that out. Something from Aaron, he's going to talk a little bit about inspections and probably StrataDocs, that kind of thing. Maybe a little blurb about that goes out with your email to help everybody out. It's all free, guys. So don't go paying a lot of money for things that's already out there. Use the Engage, check it out, check out the campaigns, check out the neighborhood news there as well. It does an automatically email to your clients, and I'm trying to switch over to that one to figure out what it's all about, because it does basically what the Collaboration Center in Paragon does. Now, the thing I heard about Paragon though, and the Collaboration Center, is that your clients are able to search on that. One thing I found with the Collaboration Center ongoing was you could send them all the new listings that came out that met their criteria, but they couldn't search on their own. And that's something that I would like to have on mine, so my client could go into my website on the Collaboration Center through my name and then start searching for this and that and something else, which would make it a lot more effective. So I don't know where we're going with that. I haven't tested it out. I haven't seen it. So if you guys know a little bit about that, or if you've tried it, let me know. But these are all free, guys. So make sure you're utilizing the technology and it's already here for you. That's free, and make the most of that. Work smart, not harder. So we got that one there, and then for those of you, just a heads up on the next in-house, which is I think March 14th or 15th. We're going to have Jimmy Latang. Some of you have seen him before. He's an accountant, and he talks about PRECs and tax write-offs for realtors. So if you're at that level, you're thinking about it, or make sure you make an appointment for that. So PREC is Personal Real Estate Corporation. So if you're a new realtor, don't worry about it. You don't need one, don't have to have one. But if you're established a little bit and you're making some money, don't know what to do with it, you can either come and talk to me or you can talk to Jimmy Latang. He'll help you with that. I can spend your money for you too. So he'll be talking about pure receipts. So that's all I have. I'm going to introduce Aaron here. Aaron is, I've known this guy forever. We're just talking 20 years probably.
Stand here.
And he's
The
been
camera?
here.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
stand over
Hi,
here.
everyone. Yes.
So come on over
All
here.
right. I think I have a presentation that's going to flash straight up this way, and I'm going to be standing in front of it, so it's going to be really weird.
He's
So
a good guy.
Go. Thank you. So, and we'll start with that. So yes, hi everyone. My name's Aaron. I know several of you, but I work primarily in the Lower Mainland. I've been a home inspector for about 13 years, quite a while and stuff too. So I've seen kind of lots of different things. I'm going to talk a little bit about condos. And the reason I'm going to talk about condos is it's really my focus this year, just because I've seen a lot of different things happen with condos, more so than I ever have. And I thought that'd be a good topic to talk about because, hey, let's face it, over here in Lower Mainland, we have a lot of condos. I'd say the predominant amount of inspections I do are condos and some of the different things I'm doing. So I'm going to try to run this presentation and run in front of the camera at the same time or something like that. I don't know how I'm going to do this.
I can do the next slide.
Okay, well then I don't know what slides are coming. So, all right. I'm going to try and do this without looking. Okay, there we go. Is that good? Okay. I don't know how good it is. Is that really in reverse?
It is actually.
Hey, those people online, is it on reverse? Oh, that's
Yes.
awesome. So,
I don't know how to change
all right,
that
we're going to be
though.
good at reverse
There's a mirror on it.
reverse reading. It should be mirror.
You can check the video and it's a mirror.
I just realized everyone probably sees this in complete.
Video settings. I don't know where that is actually.
Okay, we'll roll with it.
Yeah, sorry.
So all right. So like I said, I've been doing this, well, I put over 10 years. My start date was 2010 as an inspector. So one of the things I want to talk about is just, I touched briefly on depreciation reports. I put down commercial inspections. Every once in a while, I'm going to try and develop some sort of presentation around commercial inspections. They're very different than residential inspections. That'll be for another day. And I have used drones and such too as well. So that's a little bit about me. I guess I'll do the next slide, like simple. So why get an inspection on condos? Here's a good question for the people I guess are here and anyone online wants to answer. Anyone had a client say, we don't need inspections, just a condo? Like, yeah, like 100%, like happens all the time, right? Like all the time. It happens to me. People call me up and they say, it's just a condo. Why should I get an inspection? And I gotta do my talk and say, hey, here's different things. And I tell people, if you were to buy a condo eyes closed, like don't get inspected. It's be okay. I'd say like 85% of the time, it's gonna be okay. But I also tell people this is the most dangerous situation that I've almost been killed in an inspection have been in condos. Right. So, and yes.
What happened?
I will show you. I will tell you. Yeah, now I gotta leave you on that. And I'll go to the next one, right? So some of the things I said about condos, obviously we want to identify deficiencies. That's the whole bread and butter for inspections. But I also tell people a lot, like, we want to document property. I've had instances where people swap out appliances, right? It doesn't happen often, but it's happened, right? They take pictures of those serial numbers at times just in case. I've had people punch holes in walls that weren't there before. So I tell people, wow, we take lots of pictures of an inspection of condos as well, right? So at least we can go back to a picture and say, that wasn't there before. It's funny, realtors come back and tell me like, well, I take pictures of the place too, right? Like, well, then great. You can do that for every transaction if you want, but we do it as a practice anyway. Stuff too. So, okay, next slide. I see seeing you move around and try to get the best position, right? So here we go. Here's another great thing about condos. So I added this image in here. It's an infrared image above a bathroom. Okay, you can see obviously there's a leak from the bathroom above. Okay, right here you can see this is the wall. This is the ceiling. This wall, and I'm going to add a little context to this. On the other side of this wall is another bathroom of the same unit. So I put down the question, who do you think will need to fix the damage? So everyone always tells me the obvious question is Strat. Strat is going to fix the stuff up here. That is true because this is part of the common property wall, right? Above it's another unit. But what about this wall here, which is actually joined to another bathroom? The seller will actually end up having to fix that. Okay, so now you can try and claim it on insurance. Yeah.
I got a place is a bathroom up and a bathroom down. And there's proper pipe in between.
The pipe will be fixed by strata, but the damage caused by the pipe will be on you. Okay, so that's why we get insurance, right? So and it can be sometimes a lot of people say when they tell me strata will fix all that stuff, or the person above you will fix all that stuff. In theory, yes, they should, but in practice, they probably won't. So and that's why we kind of look out for these things and stuff too. So, anyways, okay, next slide. All right, here's another example of documenting conditions of a property. Now, this was a carpet I found tacked to a balcony out of the condo unit. Seems fine and normal. First thing I said was, hey, I don't know if you're supposed to have a carpet on there. You better make sure that strata knows about it. Seller turns around and goes, oh yeah, you're right. We're not supposed to have carpet on there. Don't worry, I'll take it off. And if we go to the next picture, this is what it looked like on the day of possession. So to much my client's surprise. So like I said, we documented this, made sure what it looked like before, what it looked like after, right? So we, someone can't go like, well, someone's like that or something like that, right? So I know it's a little unbelievable, but this was a shocker, all right, stuff too. So, all right, stuff that have almost killed me. I've seen this picture before, right? But I'll show it again because it was a very shocking moment. This was a condo. You can see the two pictures. This was a screw. There's a screw here. I actually had the panel plate on there, and I took my drill to remove the screw. As soon as my drill touched the screw, I undrilled it. There was a flash. That's the flash. Popped my drill straight back, and I was like, "What was that?" Screw popped out, and at that point, I handled the panel like this. Drill in. For some reason, I didn't do that. I just put my drill in that day. I don't know why, and that happened. So of course, I tested it. It was no voltage at that time. So that was. Undid all the screws, took it out. Apparently, that screw right there had penetrated the dryer wire. And as the dryer was running, the dryer was, I was testing the dryer at the same time, that whole panel was electrified at the same time. So if anyone in that touched the panel while the dryer was on, probably would have died. So most dangerous situation I've been in is that one. And that screw, next slide, right? Second most dangerous situation. Okay, so I kept that screw as a reminder that sometimes I got to be careful. I always test my panel. All right, this one. This one was when I did in another condo. I took the panel plate off, and lo and behold, I know I showed this picture before. There's insulation stuck all inside the panel inside there. Why would anyone do that? I don't know. Obviously, huge fire danger. I remember when I took the panel plate off, I just laughed and I was like, "You can't." and so many different things. You look at every logic in your being says you can't do that, but still you don't see anyway. Like, how can you think of that? Do you call people like, is there some weird code I don't know about? You're allowed to do this, and everyone's like, you're holding it like, okay, great. But obviously you can't do that, right? You can see the charring around the panel there. So it's a huge fire hazard. I don't know how many people that forego inspections decide to take off their panel and look. I don't know, maybe but that's what we did. Well, there's a video. There should be a little plate. So this was, I guess I showed this is a new construction I did, again, a condo. I also don't say forego new constructions. I like this video. I've shown it before, just because it kind of goes to show always get things checked. So yeah, thank you. So I have 9 floors in the air, right? So I've had people tell me before, like, oh, don't worry, Strata will fix it. Or sorry, the developer will fix it. Yes, they will fix it. They'll fix it before someone falls. Okay? So, and that's why I wanted to. Yeah, I pushed the glass too, because if the gaskets are right, you push it right over. I guess I'll discover the hard way. Push one over one day. I'll go, oops. So, I don't even know how to test it. Clapping, when we test decks, when we put it on decks, the first thing I do is keep the posts, and if I do that, well, the post is loose, the deck will fall off. There's a problem. So, all right, anyways. So, some of the stuff that we do as core property inspectors, like for stratas, if you try to get to the roof, mechanical room, electrical room, underground parking, those are the 4 major things. Whenever you get a property inspection, ask people, those are the 4 major things. Not every strata lets us on. About 5 years ago, we used to let us on all the time, but lately they have not. And it's like 10 years. It's actually think people are just lazy. They just don't want to put this on. But that's what we get. It's I've also started doing a program where I start to review the depreciation reports. I've embedded into my inspection reports. Just I look ahead to the next 5 years and just try to quantify what the major projects are coming to, usually over $100,000. And if I get the entitlement, I'll try to boil down what the entitlement for that unit looks like. So
Like,
still trying to do it. I don't know. I guess I put 2 slides. So, all right. So here's another one I did. This is some of the examples of strata stuff before. I was still trying to get the mirror thing going. I can see it, but it's just not happening. It's
yeah, no,
it's just not happening. It's okay.
yeah,
Well,
sorry.
it's all right. Sorry, guys, online. Okay, so it's another video. We'll just play this one.
Wiggly.
And it's water traffic. So yes, when I was there, I remember I looked at that and the strata. Every time I do these things, the strata manager's with me and they're super surprised every time. Like, what? I'm like, oh. So there you go, right? So, anyways, some of the things. Next one. I remember this roof. I looked at it. Actually, this was not too long ago. This one, I remember they told me, "Oh, it's a new roof." I'm like, "Oh, good, no problem." And up there, doesn't look like that. Doesn't look like a new roof at all. And like, and I tell my clients like, oh, new roof and such too. This actually happens pretty frequently. The new roof thing, but there's 2 different kinds of roofs, right? There's like an asphalt shingle pitch part and a flat part. I've gone to lots of inspections, right, where they say it's a new roof, but they meant it's only one part of the place, the other part of the top. Oh, there's a video. So many questions by the boilers on the game too. So anyways, yes, again, went in there, strata managers, that's super surprised. I have like pictures of my pool. I try to pull them all out of these presentations. Just want to have your my entire box of underground parquet, and literally the whole parquet has water running through at the same time and stuff too. I'm just standing there, and I'm the only person there, and I'm looking around going, I don't know what to do, right? So I got to tell someone, but yeah. So leasing condos, I want to talk a little bit about leasing condos and what it means. Leasing condos is a reference to a time when they built stucco buildings in the 90s. Very popular project, what they call these flatting, updated flatting, which has like air gap. I guess it's not like but the thing I want to talk about is how to identify a building. Okay, so flashing that got it right. If you go to the next slide, I can set that part out. It's not that. Anyway, here we go. There's a very good example here. Flashing, right? Flashing right along here. That would be a range. Right? And it really the flashing is what gives it away. The flashing implies there's been an air gap installed behind the flashing. So very easy. You guys can look like you want straight up and green screen. Don't do anything. Right? So. But whenever you see a non-range screen, they may never range screen this in their spot. Where the shot may come to you where they do this. I don't know, 5 years away, 1 year away, would just be understanding what it means. Because it's my job anyway. There. Yes. So. Okay, so here's what the depreciation report analysis that looked like. So as you see, I've kind of gone ahead like 5 years here. I guess the numbers don't show up so clear on the wall here and such too, but essentially this is what they're going to get. I really want to take a depreciation report, which would be like 80 pages, boil it down to 2 pages so it's easy to read and someone can look through. And I just try to, again, take the entitlement and say, this is what your exposure might look like if strata was to levy for 100%. Most strata don't, but again, this is the worst case scenario what happens. I find that that's been really popular. I can go to the next slide. Okay. So, here. So, yeah, so if I get the minutes, I do have to charge extra for strata minutes because the other day I received strata minutes on 800 pages. It was great, right? So it takes me some time, but I can do something like this, strata minutes or time crunch. I can go do strata minutes. I can pull out more plates. But things like, this particular one, like EV charger, like there's fetal action, there's a bunch of stuff. Knocking a root, toilet, things like $50 for a place to put it. So pull things like that out. So again, I try to keep it under 2 pages, just so it's easy to read. Oh yeah, I added this last little bit. Here are just some good things to know. This is CPVC water lines, not a popular material, but a material I use. If a building has this, it's a good chance to replace the plumbing in the near future because this stuff is not good. This particular stuff called low guard gold actually has a recall on it. The reason is because, once again, I'm not going to get into technicality, but if they have CPVC, it's not great. And if I see that, I'd be telling clients you should really budget for a plumbing replacement. I've said this before, electric ceiling panels. Again, if they have electric ceiling panels in the buildings from the 90s, BC Technical Safety actually has a warning that these should be decommissioned. It's electrically called. There's 3 brands. The brands blow my mind because I forget them every time. I have to look it up. But the 3, I think, as Flex Watt, as Flex, and something else Flex, something like that, right? So either way, I think the point of the matter is if it's a 90s building, electric ceiling panels, you have to be careful. I actually did right now. Thermoflex, Flex One, Aztec, Flex on. See, Flex stuff. Right, so, and I always talk about placing rubber water lines with metal braided water lines, and people laugh at me because they say it like every inspection. To the point that the realtors that work long enough, they actually can say it on my behalf, and I actually don't have to say it. But this one, see, this one's swelling, this one's cracking, and especially in condos, this can be especially sensitive because we don't want water going down straight down. I've seen some condos in the bylaws. Just a little tip. I wonder why sometimes people use these rubber water lines stuff too. Because the manufacturers of the appliances typically send rubber water lines. So if you have an appliance installation on a new building and you see rubber water lines, it probably came with the manufacturer. And the developer was like, I'm not spending more money on changing the code, aren't they, for that? I keep seeing people say that they're trying to change code, but I don't know. I don't know. I haven't seen anything yet come in. Mind you, they'll update me when the code changes. Yeah, I'm like the last person to find out when these things change. I got to dig my own research. But as far as I know, you're still allowed to do it. It's just such a very popular practice to put metal braided. People don't. But if you get a developer who basically doesn't want to spend extra money, they'll just do whatever stuff.
And Aaron, forgive me, I was writing when you said 90s builds need to replace the what?
No, you got to be careful with those electric ceiling radiant panels, right? Replacing is hard, but you got to be aware that there's a recall and stuff. And the hard part is they've already been installed. And how do you check what the manufacturer is? Because you can't, because you have to open the wall to check it, or someone has to know. I think the big thing to know is, like BC Technical Safety said, you really can't be using style panels. That's considered violence. So whenever I see electric ceiling panels, like if you're going into a property, your client's interested in, they have electric ceiling panels, first thing you got to do is ask them, like, what are they, right? And if we forget the names, you can Google it. It's all over the place on which ones are recalled and stuff too. And if they say it's those kind, like, well, you got to be aware these aren't supposed to be used, right? So, and there's a handful of buildings still used, not a lot, but there's a handful still used. All right, people always ask me about prices. I get asked every time, so I figure just talk about it now. It's just easier. This is my prices so far, what I'm charging now. They may change, I'm sorry. So, all right, but this is what they are of today, right? So, cool.
Is that including your condo though?
No, it's not including the condo. Sorry, the depreciation report I do for free, right? That's automatic, just because it doesn't take me a whole bunch of time. But strata minutes takes me a little time. I have to.
And what is the cost for that? Like if you wanted to just do that?
Plus just the strata minutes.
Yeah, if your client's looking at several places.
I set the price at 75 right now. If they just want strata minutes, just because again, don't if I get like 100 requests this month for strata docs, then obviously I'll have to increase it and stuff too. But right now, I feel that's reasonable for the time. It's sitting at home. And everyone who's ever read strata docs knows that's all. So cool. Any questions?
How are you finding the market? You get busier now? Or?
Yeah, I know we were just talking about that. Like, the last 3 weeks has really picked up. for us. You know, it was funny, during the whole multiple offer thing, we were really busy Monday, Tuesdays. Those were our flat out busiest days. Now we're really busy Thursday, Friday, Saturdays. And someone told me it's because that decision period, everyone's really nervous and we're getting inspection in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday part, because they want to say we don't want to remove subjects and we take the decision.
Interesting.
Yeah, but again, that's not true. You wouldn't get, I don't know. I've heard that's why people are
It's
really
a gray
reluctant.
area.
It's I know, no one's willing to try it out and see what happens.
Well, everything has a cycle, right? And
Yeah.
so if with the multiple offers, you're busy Monday, Tuesdays.
Yeah.
Now you're back to almost a normal time for your inspections. The
Yeah.
subjects are always coming off towards the end of the week or the end of the month type
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, a lot of people are trying to
Interesting, I know.
Fridays and stuff too. Yeah.
But it's good. You gotta have inspections.
Yeah.
I wouldn't buy anything without an inspection.
Yeah, the one thing I glossed over is really for inspections, a lot of it's protect you guys as realtors, right? You guys carry so much liability to begin with. Like if we can take some of that off you, that's what we're here for. That's, you know, what's $400, $450 for a condo, just save heartache down the road that might potentially be there. I mean, most times it's okay, but you know, every once in a while it's not. And that's what
We
we want to do.
spot asbestos problem areas and do advice on that, and this should be checked.
Yeah, I have very similar advice to every house that has asbestos. Is if you're going to do renos, you want to get tested. We know some common material that contains asbestos, but no one can eyeball it. And it's impossible, right? Like you got to take it for a lab test.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, on our contracts, there's actually a line that says you check for asbestos, and 99% inspectors say no, because it's impossible. Right? But you got to test it. So I tell people that are buying into a unit or a building that has asbestos is if you're doing renos, you need to budget for asbestos. That's just reality, right? So it's something to be mindful.
Any other questions?
I'm okay with time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Sorry about the mirror thing.
We tried.
Yeah, we tried.
It looks fine.
It looks fine. No, on the video, it's a mirror.
So we've got
Oh,
Ken Pazder coming in. We just heard him sneak into the door. One of the things I keep telling all you guys is don't be invisible. When you're out on the street, you're out working or something, shopping for your milk and your bread, carry something around that people are gonna know that you're a realtor. Doug has this on his binder and never leaves the office without it, and I bet you he's got real estate questions from this that'll talk miles. But it's, oh yeah, so.
Way to go, Van
But
Wyck.
it's not a hard thing to do. You walk your dog, you put a jacket on your dog or something like that if you want. But don't be invisible. Put a sticker on your laptop, put a sticker on your phone. Have a pin or something because you will get business.
You still have those brown UC.
Yeah, I think Doug still has them.
If you can give me one, I'd love to wear it.
I'll give you two.
Sure, give me two.
Put one on your back.
Yeah.
But yeah, guys, and they work, and here's case in point. When I worked at corporate, Brian Rushton got me to wear a gold jacket. That was that's how the brand started. It still is huge throughout other countries. And I used to go grocery shopping and put gas in my car. And I can't count how many times because there was a lot where I would get real estate questions. And back in the day, there was a pager, no phone. I just write the name on my business card. I go to Richard Van Slake at Century 21 Gold Team in Richmond, hand them the card saying this person's interested in buying and selling. And he'd hand it off to another agent in his office. And every now and then someone would drop by with a little real estate gift for me at head office to say thanks for the deal. So it does work, but I promise you, if you don't do it, it won't work. So accept the challenge. And who was the old one of the guys in our office, Jerry Gramick, no longer licensed with us yet, he's retired. Everybody knew Jerry, and that's what he said. And I made him a bet with wearing a coat with his name on it. He got a real estate deal because he always walked the seawall, and someone yelled his name that was behind him, not in front of him. So it works, guys. It works. Ken, did I see you poking your head around?
Yes.
The real estate lawyer extraordinaire.
Are you gonna leave some cards out there?
Oh yeah, I have some up there. I just didn't want it.
Yeah, and we'll put this video to everybody too. And thank you again. Come on in, Ken.
I'll send a copy of the presentation.
Everybody, Ken, best real estate lawyer in the city. There you go. Thanks, Michael. Don't let me down. Okay.
Hi, everyone.
See you later.
How's your year started?
Everything
Good.
Good.
Yeah, good, good.
Hard to believe it's February. Just started January a couple of minutes ago. So yeah, I just to finish up with Michael's comments. Yeah, always carry a card with you. You'd be surprised how many people you say, "Do you have a card?" No. Okay, so the old thing of tapping your phones together and changing information, that's long gone due to security concerns. So just carry a card with you all the time, because everybody out there is a potential client of yours. Everybody wants to buy a house. Everyone wants to sell a house. So yeah, by all means, definitely do that. So today, Michael and Doug were asking me to talk about some things. You guys have got a whole bunch of new rules that have come in. There's the foreign buyers tax, there's the rescission period, there's the change of the bylaws for rentals, rental restrictions. So there's a whole bunch of things that have changed. Your contract keeps changing all the time. It actually looks more and more like a commercial contract than it did 20 years ago. It looked like a residential contract. So I guess maybe speaking of contracts, we'll just talk about some of the things that we've seen over the years in terms of writing a contract, because like I said, this new contract you guys have now is I don't know who designed it, but this rescission period should have just been in a schedule at the back of the contract. And they should have just left the contract alone, put a schedule on the back, a sticker on the front saying this could be subject to rescission period, and put all that stuff at the back, but they didn't. So now you've got this rescission stuff stuck right through the contract just to make things more difficult. So anyway, just one more things you guys have to look at. So when you guys write a contract, things that you got to pay attention to, apart from finding a good house for someone or accepting a contract if somebody's making a purchase, is to make sure the contract's enforceable. Okay, so the situation, the board obviously has a standard form contract for residential real estate, and they have a whole bunch of clauses that you can put in to subject to this, subject to that, and so I find that most of the time those clauses are enforceable. Most of the time they work. Sometimes your contract doesn't always include everything though. For example, one of the things that I see all the time is the size of the property. Now, it doesn't matter as much if you're buying a 5,000 square foot house and it turns out to be 100 square feet smaller than you thought. But if you're buying a 700 square foot condo in Yaletown, 150 square feet is a lot. So of course your contract doesn't contain anything about the size of the property. Okay, so when you're writing a contract, you're acting for a buyer. If you're a seller, you're just getting the contract in from somebody else. So it's very rare that you're going to put a clause in your contract saying, the seller warrants the property 750 square feet. What I have seen realtors do is I've actually seen them put a clause in the purchase agreement saying the buyer is satisfied with the size and the dimension of the property. Why would you do that? You're acting for the buyer. Does anybody have an idea why you would put a clause like that in your contract? I can see the seller putting it in there, but why would you put it in as a buyer?
Because the seller wants to come back in. Because the buyer wants to come back and charge the seller for square footage.
Sure, but if you put a clause in the purchase agreement that says the buyer satisfied with
Yeah,
the size and the
they
dimension,
can't come back.
that's pretty well precluded that, but you're acting for the buyer. I just had a case about 6 months ago in South Surrey. We have a satellite office out there, and someone put an offer in on a 1.75 acre property, nice house in the middle, figuring they're going to put 3 townhouses there. And their realtor actually put a clause in there saying, yeah, we're satisfied with the size and the dimension of the property. And so after there was a no subject offer, because it was, it was a hot market back then. And then lo and behold, after the property was accepted, they did some checking, and turns out it's, like 20,000 square foot, 25,000 square feet smaller than they thought. And now, of course, the buyer wants to back out. Prices are starting to slide a little bit, and he's got a 25,000 square foot smaller property than he thought. So meanwhile, he's got a nice clause on page 2, the buyer is satisfied with the dimensions and the size of the property. His lawyer's trying to get out of this now. Okay, so the realtor just basically screwed his own client by doing this. Okay, so if you care about the size, put a subject condition, subject to the buyer verifying the size. Okay, buyer can look at the strata plan, the buyer can look at an appraisal, the buyer can get it measured. Those are all the things that you guys are aware of, but if you want to, if it's important to your buyer, sure, put it in as a subject condition.
We can do the seller's warrants, the seller warrant that the size is.
Yeah, the seller will never sign that. But so it's up to you if you care about it. Most people do, especially when the smaller the property you're buying, the more you care about the square footage, because you're saying $1,000 a square foot or $1,200 a square foot, 50 square feet. That's, you feel like you go paid by 50 grand. So again, that's just one thing. It's not in your contract. Just deal with it. If you put it in as a subject condition, or alternatively, if you guys have your own checklist. So sometimes I see realtors, when you want to sort of cover yourself and say, well, my client knows about property transfer tax, my client's satisfied with the size, my client knows about spec tax, we put it all in the contract. But you have to realize, like, who are you putting it in for? You're acting for the buyer. So is any of this stuff helping the buyer? Not really. You might have your own checklist, and you can have your buyer initial that saying, yes, we've talked about spec tax, we've talked about property transfer tax, we've checked the square footage, or you've waived the square footage. But you don't need to put that in the contract because you're acting for the buyer. So why would I put stuff in the contract for the benefit of the seller? Just to preclude my client from coming back and suing at a later point in time. So again, there's nothing wrong with saying, I've informed my client of these things and he or she has waived them. So have your own checklist and have your client just sign off on it. Yeah, we talked about this, you waived that, you don't want a building inspection. I've seen no subject offers where people put in all the normal subject conditions and say buyer waives, buyer waives, buyer waives. Why? Why would you bother? Just have your own condition and have your buyer confirm that you've talked about it. So again, just remind yourself, who are you acting for? You're not acting for the seller when you're writing a contract.
Yeah, if you put that in the contract, buyer's waive right for suit inspection. Would that be indicated that you would have discussed it? Or
Well, I guess it could be. I mean, you say you signed it, but I mean, well, why would you do that? Like, I mean, like you say, just have your own checklist of all the things that you would, the normal due diligence, that especially if your client wants to waive them. Otherwise, put it in as a subject condition. It's just like I said, just remember who am I acting for? What kind of contract do I want to write to protect the seller? So, okay, another one that seems to still come up despite the GST has been around for 25 years is GST. Okay, we see this over and over and over. And that is that, GST, I think I've got a lot of realtors now in the whole lower mainland using this clause that when you write a contract, you put in a clause saying the purchase price includes GST if it's applicable, or some variation of that. And that just means that you as a buyer probably don't know anything about the property, what it was being used for, whether or not it's been an Airbnb, whether or not it's been had for any commercial purpose. Your contract, again, doesn't deal with GST. So again, most people say, well, it's a used residential property, there's no GST, what's the problem? Well, the problem is you can find out on the completion date you're wrong. Okay, so let's just assume your contract's silent about GST, and day or two before completion, whoops, it turns out there is GST. Who do you think's paying it? Buyer pays the GST. That's the bottom line, unless the contract says otherwise. So you have an unhappy buyer. Okay. So the bottom line is, where does GST come from? It depends on what the seller was doing with the property. Like everybody knows brand new property, yeah, there's GST, but let's say it's not brand new. What determines whether there's GST? What was the seller doing with the property? He was using it for Airbnb. That's a commercial use that's subject to GST. Was he using it for office space? Yeah, that's a commercial use that's going to be subject to GST. So how would you know that you're as a buyer? You don't. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't. Pretty much anything you buy in Whistler is subject to GST, and a lot of it's old. Why? Because it's all short-term rental. That's all subject to GST. The short-term rental means anything under a month is considered by CRA to be commercial use. So commercial use, you pay GST.
It can, with the tax deferment, the GST or no?
Tax deferment.
Yeah, if it's an older person and they defer taxes or whatever, and then that's on the title as well.
No.
So they would be responsible as the seller for that, at the registration.
Sonny had a situation where you put the no GST in there and the other guy said, no, we're not signing it. No way. Said,
It was a
well,
long time ago, he crossed it out, well, there's no GST, so we're gonna cross it off. I said, well, just leave it on, there's no GST. So it was an
Exactly.
issue.
That's exactly
Yeah.
why you put it in.
And I was fighting with them and they had to leave it in because the seller didn't wanna leave it in, saying, well, there's no GST. Well, I don't know that.
Can you put a warrant, the seller warrants, there is no GST?
You could do
Yeah,
that.
something like
Yeah,
that,
you
yeah.
could do that. I mean, that's the same thing. You can say if there's GST, the seller's responsible for it. The seller warrants there's no GST. It's just because if the transaction's audited later by CRA, first thing they do is come to the seller. They say, you were responsible for collecting it, give us the money, which is fine. But if the seller didn't warrant that there's no GST or it wasn't a GST inclusive price, they can come after the buyer and recollect the money from the buyer. Okay, so your buyer's back on the hook again. So by those kind of clauses, you're basically shifting the onus back onto the seller. You should know whether there's GST, and if there is, tell me, because we'll deal with it in our negotiation. But if there isn't any, fine, then what's the problem with you warranting that or saying it's inclusive? So it's a red flag if someone wants to balk at that and say, no, we're not going to sign it. Okay, so that means there is an issue, so let's look into it. So again, some clauses I've seen dealing with GST saying, oh, the buyer and the seller will make their own investigations. Well, how is the buyer going to make an investigation when he doesn't know anything about the property? Okay, so the seller is the one who's supposed to know whether there's GST or not. If you're acting for a seller and that clause is in there, that it's inclusive of GST or the seller warrants there's no GST, have your seller talk to their accountant. If there's any issue about maybe there's GST, have them talk to their accountant. Just a used residential house and the guy's been living in it, chance to say there's no GST. But the bottom line is this, you just, as the buyer, you don't have that information handy. If it's a commercial property, there's GST every single time. Okay, but you don't know what the use of the property's been before. And again, we run into this all the time. It's a brand new property. No one's ever lived in it. And now the seller is selling it. The guy bought it from the developer, paid the GST, never lived in it. A year later, he's selling it. There may well be GST on it. Okay. So again, the big question, I've said this many times before, most surprises in real estate are bad. So when the person finds out, oh, there's a surprise, guess what? It means there's GST, you get to pay an extra 5%. Wow, I'm really happy about that. Or the property's smaller than I thought. Wow, I'm happy about that too. So again, all these things that you guys are just due diligence, all these subject conditions. And I guess the good thing is the market, not that it's ever that good when the market slows down, but at least you can put those conditions back in your offers again. This idea of writing these no subject offers is crazy. So that's gone for a while. And of course, now you have a rescission hearing when you don't need it. So again, that's no big surprise. But anyway, having said that, just as far as GST goes, throw the clause in, and if it stays in there, great. Then you don't have to worry about it. We actually had a realtor a couple years ago threw that clause in, and the seller balked about it because it turned out there was GST, and his lawyer surprisingly saying, well, it's stuck on page 2. How could we see it? Do you have eyes? I mean, you can't read page 2. Anyway, so the bottom line is they sign it, they're stuck with it. Property transfer tax. You guys all know about property transfer tax, but of course you also know about foreign buyers tax. Okay, so who is not going to pay foreign buyers tax if they're buying property? What are the two big categories?
There's no foreign buyers anymore.
That's true. We haven't had a lot of foreign buyers for a long time though, because we've had this what we call foreign buyers tax, which is the additional property transfer tax of 20%. So if you're not a Canadian citizen and you're not a permanent resident of Canada, you're going to get stuck paying that extra 20%. Okay. So that's been around in BC since 2016, 2017. And of course, that put a big damper on foreign buyers. Now, of course, Trudeau's come along and put the no foreign buyers tax on the federal level. Okay, so now we have a 2-year moratorium on people buying property from outside of Canada who are not Canadian citizens or permanent residents. So if you ever have a buyer and they tell you, first thing you say, well, are you a Canadian citizen? Are you a permanent resident? They say, yes, good. Well, let's just carry on. If you're not, you can now get nailed with the BC foreign buyers tax, which is just basically property transfer tax. But you also have this prohibition saying, well, maybe you can't buy at all. Like you're banned. And of course, if you go ahead and the guy tells you that and you help him buy, then you can be liable as well for a big fine.
It's
So,
only 10 grand,
sorry,
only $10,000.
Are you kidding?
it's only,
Yeah.
so what's your deductible on your insurance?
It's only
2 grand
How much?
or air certificate, 10,000.
Okay. Yeah, but the bottom line is, you don't want to do that. So if your client gives you any indication, or let's say he's buying through a company and the company has got some, foreign parties. And you say, well, who owns the shares, whatnot. In a case like that, you're probably better off to just say, look, call your lawyer and he can look into this to see whether your company qualifies as a non-foreign entity. Because there's this 3% rule which says if they're within shareholdings are more than 3%, this company can be disqualified. So of course, first thing people do when they see a ban like this is, so well, let's incorporate a BC company. Good, we're good to go. No, who owns the BC company? So if there's foreigners owning that, you have to look into that more carefully. So the foreign buyers ban won't affect us that much. It might affect the other provinces more because they don't have this additional 20% property transfer tax, which we've had for like 5-6 years now. So I don't think we're going to see a huge drop off. The other thing that's strange about the federal foreign buyer ban is that it only applies to residential real estate. It only applies to some residential real estate. And in the smaller centers, you probably still buy if you're a foreigner because they've got this other regulation about the census data. The population is so much. If it's not there, you can still buy. The other thing is it doesn't apply to farmland. It doesn't apply to commercial property. So all that happens when you put a plug here is the money flows somewhere else. So people can buy up shopping centers and buildings and farmland.
I have a question though.
Yeah.
What if the strata is commercial on the bottom and residential on top? Can they still buy it as foreign buyers?
Yeah, well, you mean a double use property?
Yeah.
A live workspace, kind of, yeah.
Live work, that's a good question. I'd say probably not, because if it's categorized as residential, that portion is likely to be disallowed. So you're not going to buy just half of it.
So they would go by the zoning?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I'd have to look into it more carefully. If you have someone who wants to buy that and they're a foreigner, give me a call, we'll look it up. See, this is once you get into these more particular situations, then you have to look through the regulations, which in fact just came out about a month ago.
Yeah.
This tax came into effect on January 1, and the regulations are there now. There are exemptions. Some people can buy. If you have a spouse who's a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, they're going to be on the title. You're exempt. Some immigrants are exempt. Some refugees are exempt. Some First Nations are exempt. So there are exemptions, but it's not just like a blanket statement saying, okay, that's right, you can buy. So if you've got a person who's buying and they tell you they're not Canadian citizen, they're not permanent resident, and their spouse isn't either of those who's also buying, then you've got to take some extra steps, at least for the next 2 years. Okay, so that's just one more thing for you guys to keep an eye on. And I believe your board actually has some kind of form that I saw the other day saying that you get your client to certify that they're not a foreign national for purposes of foreign buyer's tax. I don't know if you guys use that or not, but
Isn't it in the contract anyways that they have to?
Yeah, on the
do?
bottom.
well, on the bottom, there's a
Yeah.
checkbox that says, yes, you're a Canadian citizen. I think the board's gone further and they have an actual little certification, but if someone's checking off the box that says, I'm a permanent resident or I'm a Canadian, that $10,000 penalty says you can knowingly assist someone. Somebody tells you, no, I'm a Canadian citizen. Well, I mean, you're not knowingly
Yeah.
If they're not, it's not something that you're aiding and abetting something that you know about. Okay, another thing we see a lot of is when you're, and this is, as the properties get squeezed more and more with these various taxes, non-residents, sometimes they're dumping their properties here, like Cole Harbor and some other areas in Vancouver. You guys know that the empty homes tax now is 5% in Vancouver, ludicrous as that is. The spec tax for satellite families is 2%. So you could be tagged with a lot of money if you want to leave your property empty. So sometimes people are selling their properties. If they're non-residents, you have to take a few extra steps. So if someone's asking you to list a property for them, but they don't normally live in Canada, then there's going to be a holdback of 25%, usually from the sale price. That's going to be used to pay the capital gains on the property if there is any. So there's an extra step, or if you're buying from somebody who is a non-resident, again, now there's a little box on the bottom of your contract says the person is or is not a resident of Canada. And again, the reason for that is Revenue Canada does not trust people who don't live here regularly. So when the money gets paid, most properties you're going to see they've gone up in value unless they were bought last week. So there's a capital gain. Okay, so when you sell, you have to pay a capital gain. But if you don't live in Canada and the money goes out of the country, the government is not satisfied that that person is actually going to pay it. So they make the lawyers and the notaries, whoever's acting on the file, they make them do a holdback. Sometimes, most of the time, it's 25% of the sale price. Sometimes it's a bit more. And then you have to file something called a T2062, which sometimes we do, sometimes we get an accountant to do. And that's a calculation of the amount of capital gains tax. So out of that 25%, you pay the tax, the buyer gets a certificate from Revenue Canada saying you're off the hook, we're all good. Okay, because if a non-resident seller does not pay the tax, the buyer gets stuck paying it. Okay, so you're asking for a buyer to go, okay, we don't want to pay your tax. That's right. So that's why the standard form contract sort of covers all the bases. Even though it's getting more and more cumbersome, it does at least check off all the boxes. So sometimes when you depart from that and you decide to write your own clauses, or you decide to do something like that, it may or may not work. Okay, so sometimes we have a realtor who will say, I've added an extra clause. You read it and you go, oh, well, does it mean this or does it mean that? We're not sure. Okay, so I just had one actually in my briefcase here from last week where the realtor used the clause, the one that I like, the GST clause, that the property is inclusive of GST if it's applicable. But then he went on to say if the seller's a non-resident, GST is applicable and it's deemed to be included in the price. Now, wait a minute, that's wrong. Whether you're resident or not doesn't have anything to do with whether there's GST. Okay, so you can be a non-resident, the property is not subject to GST. You can be a non-resident, the property is subject to GST. It's got nothing to do with your residence. It just means if you're a non-resident, you're not allowed to collect the money. Okay, because again, same idea. We send the money to a non-resident and he's supposed to pay the GST, doesn't pay it. So this particular clause, the guy wrote the clause and the first part was good, but the second part was completely wrong. Like it just didn't make any legal sense. So again, if you're going to write something a little more tricky, maybe run it by Doug, run it by Michael, or you can send it to me. We'll take a look at it, see if it makes sense and see if it means what you think it means. So again, all the clauses that are in your book of clauses, some lawyer somewhere has written those. And sometimes even a lawyer writes it, it gets overturned by the court. And then the lawyers rewrite it again to comply with the court decision. So all those clauses, where you can use those, use them. If you have to think you want to be creative, that's to say at least minimally talk to Mike or Doug, and they can always bounce it off me too. So just so you don't end up writing a clause, so I've seen about half a dozen every year where you read it and you go, yeah, it might say what you said, but it could also say this. And then you're sort of into a battle of who's right. And nobody wants to really litigate anything because litigation is very slow, very time consuming, very stressful. So you don't want to get yourself or your client into litigation where you don't have to.
Ken, just relative to that, would that kind of apply to inserting your commission in there if it's not, saying I'm gonna, the real selling, the buyer's realtor is gonna get so much and so much. Could that have unintentional consequences in relation to the contract?
What's the assignments?
No, that's some contract.
You mean someone's putting right in the contract, seller's realtor gets X, buyer's realtor gets Y. I don't see it, like, I don't know that I mean, there's no harm in it. I don't see that you're gonna lose anything. I'm just curious why you'd put it in the contract, because that's usually from the listing agreement, right?
Well,
Assignments.
Well, an
well, and
assignment, yeah.
also the board is missing a couple of forms. The buyer and seller represented, seller pays, there's no data. I went to BCFSA and asked them about it, and they just don't make it. It's just really weird.
Oh, so you throw it in the contract?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if there's no other way to do it, you either put it in the contract or you write your own contract.
Yeah, that's what we kind of
Make up your own form.
It's kind of a hybrid kind of thing.
See, the thing about putting stuff in the contract, I mean, really, you have a buyer and a seller, right? That's really, I'm buying a property, here's the details, legal description, price, this, that, and the other thing. I mean, who's paying commission? The seller. Well, do I care as a buyer? So why is it in there? Okay, now if it has to be in there because there's a reason, because you can't put it anywhere else, put it in. I don't see this big downside.
Fair enough, yeah.
Okay, what else?
I got one more for you.
Sure.
A lot of times we have a clause in there for strata documents and it has the parking stall and storage lot. Sometimes that's left blank. Like the
A lot of
stall
times,
number and.
Yeah, a lot of times it's left blank.
Yeah, is that okay or not?
Well,
Should
I
you
mean,
cross it out or should you?
I mean, again, you should try and get it filled in because, of course, that's a representation by the seller saying, well, parking stall 6 and storage locker 9 go with this property. A lot of times, believe it or not, people don't know the answers to that, and even though they live there, or they just say, well, I know where I park. That's all. I don't pay attention to the numbers. So usually you can, I mean, that's going to be verified on a Form B, which you're going to get from the strata management company. So probably when you're writing the contract, you probably don't have a Form B at that point. So, I mean, I guess all you can say to the other agent is, well, could you fill it in? Like, can you ask your guy what the numbers are? If he still doesn't know, he doesn't know. I mean, I guess you could then just change it to say the seller warrants that there is a parking stall and a storage locker, which is going with this property. If you can go further and you can say what kind of parking stall it is, like, is it LCP? Is it a long-term lease? Is it just common property? I mean, there's 3 or 4 different kinds of parking stalls. Trust me, no one knows that. Even though you live in the condo, you say, well, it's just got a parking stall. But they're all different. They all have different legal rights. So it's probably a bit of a stretch to figure that the other side's going to know that at the offer and acceptance stage. But you could say, you know, the seller warrants that one parking stall and one storage locker is being transferred with this. You know, again, I created my own clause which says, well, it's this. Yeah, no one knows that. Half the strata management companies don't know that.
Strata plan should show if it's common property or LCP sometimes.
Yes, the strata plan will always show that. So if there's nothing on the strata plan, it just shows parking. It'll have a C there, which is common property. If it is LCP, they'll actually show the actual individual parking spaces with the strata lot number on it. Now, if you see the strata plan and it just shows the C, there you look at the parkade, usually on page 2 or 3, and it just shows the C, you go, okay, it's common property. But if it's a newer property, probably anything within the last 10 years, it's probably tied up by a long-term lease, okay, which is usually not filed on the title. Okay, so what that means is somebody like Bozar, Polygon, or any of these big developers, when they build a tower, what they do when they're the developer is essentially the strata council for a while until a certain number of units are sold. Then there's an AGM, and then you get your own strata council. So at that point, the developer's out the door. He doesn't have any more authority to deal with anything. But let's say there's 20, 30 parking stalls still left, and let's say there's 20 or 30 units still left. But there's been over 60% of the units sold. So there's a strata council now, the developer's sort of SOL. So in the meantime, what the developers all do is they create a company, a parking company, and they do a lease of all the parking stalls, and they assign all those to the parking stall company. And so they're like 99 years, 1,000 years, whatever. And so those leases basically have tied up all the parking for the entire place. So there's nothing the Strata Council can do about it. So then the developer can just carry on marketing. And so you get this parking stall, you get this parking stall, which we're just assigning to you. So most of the newer buildings, certainly in the Lower Mainland, the parkings are long-term lease and they're prepaid. So there's nothing to pay and you just assign them on and on and on. The difference is the Strata Council can't go around and mess around with them. Change your parking space, give it to someone else, which they can do if it's just common property. Unfortunately, there's no way to tell that from looking at the strata plan. And half the time when you call the strata management company, assuming they'll even answer the phone, is they don't know. So, well, it's your job. Part of your job is to manage the parking. Oh yeah, but we're the second or third strata management company, so the records are not good. But it's almost a certainty if the developer was Boza or Polygon or any of the big guys, and it's the property's brand new or fairly new, it's probably long-term lease, which is actually good. If you're a buyer, that's what you want. Yeah.
Yeah, Ken, I started getting the Form B on the listing.
It's a good
When
idea.
you list it, you just get it. And 4 years ago, we got the Form B, found out the park changed hands between owners 4 times. And 2 new strata management companies, and nobody knew the actual parking stall. We had to back up for not transactions, but for changes in the building on the parking.
Well, that's
So it's just a practice, and I think you guys,
It's
5
not-
years ago, get the Form B on the list.
Yeah, no,
and
it's
then you're covered.
it's a good idea because it gives you some extra knowledge, and anytime you can spot a problem right off the bat. The other thing you absolutely want to do right off the bat when you do a listing, pull the title. It's the absolute first thing. Second thing, you can do that if it's a strata. But when you pull the title, there's all kinds of stuff you can, if anybody doesn't know how to read a title, let me know. I'll send you a little form with all the stuff means on a title. You find out who's the owner. Whoops, the guy I'm talking with isn't the owner. Oh, who is that? Oh, it's your cousin, your mother, your dad, or someone who's dead. Oh, okay. So we can't sell the property the way it is. We have to do something about it. Okay, so that's the first thing. Who's on the title? Is that the person you're talking to who's going to list it? And secondly, you can see on the title, when did the person buy the property? Does it say right on their application received? When? The guy says, well, I've owned it for 20 years. Well, wait a minute. It says right here, 2 years ago. That's when you acquired the title. My wife died. Ah, okay. So every time somebody changes the title, they do a new application date. So if someone says they own the property for a long time, there's always a reason that the title changed in the meantime. Quite often, if it's an older person, their partner died, their co-owner died. Then you can see what's on the title. Okay, so there's a little thing that says charges, liens, and interest. So that's a good thing to look at too as a listing agent. Okay, why? Because you look at it and you go, okay, so just had one just yesterday, actually. 1989 mortgage, Vancouver property. Okay, 1989, that's a long time ago. So you go, well, it's probably paid off. Well, it's still there. Of course, the seller doesn't even know it's there. Okay, so you tell the seller, well, we're going to order a payout from HSBC on your mortgage. No, I don't have a mortgage. I paid it off 20 years ago. No, you didn't, because it's still there. Okay, so now with this COVID thing, even though it's gone away somewhat, it's an excuse for the banks to be completely incompetent. Give bad service, don't answer the phone, et cetera, et cetera. Not that it wasn't good before, it's even worse now. So try and get a discharge from a company like HSBC or any of the big banks on short notice for a mortgage that was paid out 10 years ago. Don't hold your breath. Okay, so in the meantime, if you don't do that as the agent for the listing person, somebody's going to find out about that mortgage, but it may be later on. And this is an indictment for some lawyers and notaries. They don't even pull a title search. They're acting on a sale. This is how dumb some people are. They wait until the other lawyer sends them a copy 2 days before the completion because they saved $12. They didn't do a title search. I saved $12 on my file. So that's all the other, just to compound the first stupidity. The second one is the lawyer and notary being dumb. Because when you see a particularly a really old mortgage on there, you go, okay, well, I wonder if that's still got a balance. So you can, mention it to your client. So we're going to pay off that old mortgage. No, it's not there. Most banks throw away everything after 10 years. So they have a real hard time trying to verify and 1989 mortgage is gone. So they'll eventually do it, but if it's 2 days before closing, that's going to be a big problem. Because the buyer's lawyer is not going to accept the fact that it's probably paid off. The seller's lawyer has to give an undertaking saying, I am going to clear that mortgage. If you don't have a payout statement from the bank, just saying it's probably paid out is not good enough. So again, that's something else to do. First thing on a listing, pull the title. Sometimes you can see other stuff on the title, but duplicate title's gone. There's no mortgage on a property. You can pull the title out of land titles. It means someone's got it. But until it's put back in the land titles office, you can't sell the property. Okay, so the bank may have it. The person in the old days, before mortgages were cheap, people used to take their title and give it to their bank manager and say, here, put it as security and give me a loan. Well, it's fine. That's very rare now. But the fact is, bank 25 years later has lost your title. Because that branch closed, it's gone. Oops, can't sell my property now. Can you get a new title back? Yeah, it takes about 30 to 60 days, costs about $2,500 in legal fees, but you can't get it tomorrow. So if you can't get your title back, you can't sell your property. So again, so if somebody pulls the title and they go, whoops, there's a duplicate title's gone, best tell the seller, go find it. Because usually you have 20, 30 days to close. So, you know, you can probably do something in that period of time, but you're not gonna fix that like a week before the closing. Maybe there's a CPL on the title, which is a certificate of pending litigation. There's some litigation going. The seller's divorcing, somebody's builder's lien on there, if somebody's taking action on it. I didn't even know that. If I file a builder's lien on your house tomorrow, you won't know it. Okay, the land titles doesn't send you a copy of it. So all these things as a listing agent, just grab the title, go over it with your client. So let's take a look at your title. Okay, does this make sense? And that person, trust me, will tell you, no, that shouldn't be there. Or I paid that off. Then you can say, okay, well, we can't fix it. We'll get your lawyer to look at it, or your notary, whoever, and they can look into it before we close.
Ken, will the two mortgages be an issue?
Two mortgages.
Yeah, registered the title?
No, as long as the seller knows about them, then we, the person acting for the seller, they can track down those lenders and get payout statements and pay them out on the closing.
Money.
I've seen 3 mortgages on titles. It's no big deal. But when the stuff is on there that the seller doesn't know about, that can cause a problem. Okay, and again, just because a lot of this stuff gets done at the last minute, anything you can check in advance to have the problem not happen, as opposed to let's try and scramble around like crazy at the last minute to fix it, that's the problem. And again, if you're acting for a buyer, if you're a lawyer, first thing we do is pull the title. We saw that, we go, oh my God, there's no title. So we'll phone up the other side and tell them, just in case you haven't looked, there's no title to give us. So then they can start things. So again,
So rule of thumb, if you see inter alia, would that be okay to kind of overlook? It's a strata building?
well, yeah, inter alia just means something is on more than one property. So if it's a strata, let's say it's a big tower downtown, it's got something that says, restrictive covenant inter alia, equitable charge inter alia. It just means it's on every single unit in that whole building. If you pull at every title, you'd see those same charges. Now, sometimes what happens when you're looking at an individual property, like just a single family property, and there's a mortgage and it says inter alia, it's probably a private mortgage. And that means the lender took the charge over this property and another property. And sometimes when that charge gets paid off, they only discharge it off one property and they forget about the other one. So again, there's another reason why your client may say, oh, it's already been paid off. Why is it still there? Well, because they took it off the other property because it was a charge for both properties. So again, these are all just things that if you pull something like that and you're not sure, again, probably Michael, Doug will probably know it, or you can call us, no problem. Just give you a quick answer. And the only reason is, apart from doing a good job, like you want to make sure the title is transferred properly and the person gets what they planned for, but all you guys, you want to have the client come back to you. Okay, so it's much better if the client's totally satisfied, they had a good experience, you were good, the lawyer was good, it's all good, here's my keys. When these blow-ups happen at the last minute, it kind of takes the shine off the purchase, and the buyer's maybe not so happy and maybe doesn't come back after all the work you've done. It's gone down the drain because nobody did some searching up front. So if you guys are going to stay in this business, I can tell you one thing: your biggest source of future clients is going to be your old clients. So the more times you can go through a transaction, your client's really happy, they'll refer other people to you, they'll come back, the kids will come back. And we've had clients sometimes 3-4 times, their parents, the kids, this is how long we've been doing things. So, but you know, that's the whole point. You guys can't start from scratch every single month, brand new, no referrals. Referrals going to come from your old clients. So the happier your client is, the better job that was done, more likely you're going to get referrals and repeats. What else is interesting? Cooling off period. You guys have got any questions about the cooling off period? Anybody done a deal yet with the contract with the cooling off period in it? Yeah. Okay. Any pitches?
You gotta remember when you change the price back and forth in negotiate to change the 40%, that's the only thing you gotta think about, because you usually forget because you're not used to that.
So one thing which they like, again, not only did they put it in the wrong place in the contract instead of putting it in a schedule, the guys who drafted this cooling off period should go back to law school. Because when to cancel one of these things, there's 2 or 3 different ways to cancel. You know, they can email you, I don't know, what's the other one, fax or something. They can also send you a registered letter. Now, who uses registered letters in this day and age? But the other kicker is they say it was deemed to be served when it was sent. So I send you a registered letter today. When do you think you're going to get it? 3 or 4 days. So meanwhile, the cooling off period stops tomorrow. So again, just to be on the safe side, you should call the other realtor and say, well, did your client cancel? Like, just because we want to know, because you theoretically could have sent us a registered letter. So he can check with his client and say, no, we didn't send you any, but it's just let the period come and go. Then you're fine, good to go. Otherwise, you're merrily going along thinking the contract's still in place. No, it's been canceled. So again, that's just something that just blew my mind when I thought, oh my God, you're kidding me. Registered letter. But anyway, it is what it is. So just something to keep in mind. Just take that little extra step on the other side. Say, look, the day it looks like it's over, we don't have anything from you. Can you just confirm that? Okay. Anything else? Any other just general questions? Anybody got any thoughts on? Yeah.
And if a contract expires, at least decide not to pull up one condition, should you get contact each other to say, hey, Ken, you know, we're not proceeding, send an email? Is that good enough to let the offer just disappear?
Well, it can
We should
legally.
have
I think
signed-
you guys like to have a
I think we
standard
have.
form release.
Yeah.
Everybody signs the release, says,
Yeah.
yeah, we're all good.
Yeah.
But technically, if the seller and the buyer don't want to sign the release, the contract's still dead.
Yeah.
Subject didn't come off, it's gone. Just that one just kind of puts the final touch on it. So, yep, we're all good. It's released. We're done.
Yeah, because I know before that, we just get emails, yeah, we're not proceeding, there you go, print email.
Yeah,
Mike, we're just using an addendum on that, just to release the listing agent, just so they know, it's for a professional courtesy.
and that's not a bad idea. I mean, if it is dead, it's dead. And so the bottom line, the other thing though, just to always remind your clients when they now that we're back in the world of subject conditions, that when you write a contract with a bunch of subject conditions, that's not the equivalent of the rescission period. Okay, so if you don't take the subject off, there should be a reason that you're not taking it off. Okay, so I couldn't get financing, or no, I didn't like the inspection because of this and this and this. So the case law is very clear. You can't just say, well, I'm writing all these contracts with these conditions, but I have no intention of following through on the condition. Now, I don't know, you guys as a practice, so let's say you're writing a contract, subject conditions coming off today, this is the last day, it doesn't come off. What do you guys do? You phone the other realtor and say, why? Or do you just say, okay, it's done, here's a release, everybody sign it?
Yes.
Both. Okay. Because you probably want to know, say, well, why, you know, you didn't like the inspection, or what was it? Or maybe we can still keep the deal in play. Sometimes the other side will tell you, and sometimes they won't. So, but the law is very clear. You have to tell your client, you have to make reasonable efforts to try and remove those subject conditions. You can't just use it like another rescission.
We get the one where they put subject to inspection, they don't do inspection, they don't do subject.
Yeah,
They
that's
never did the inspection.
that's a tough one. You know, you could probably sue them over that. Now, here's the problem, is the deal's dead, the contract, the subject's gone. The person's breached the law, they didn't even go through the motion of doing that. And do you want to sue them? I had a case exactly like that, and it was extended several times, and finally the guy went and it was a subject condition, he didn't do the inspection. So I said to my guy, you know, we should sue him. You know, like this is wrong. He's not removing the subject, but then he didn't even do the inspection. So we can't say it wasn't satisfactory. But again, you know, my client didn't want to get into a lawsuit. There was a case in West Van 2 years ago. We had well, it wasn't my client, but it was a $30 million property for sale, and some clown wrote an offer, $1 million deposit. Okay, and then just wouldn't take the subjects off. So I told the client, I said, you should sue the guy for $1 million. What the hell? It's just money, free money.
Yeah.
But he didn't want to get into a lawsuit.
Whoa.
And the lawyer said, the litigation lawyer we use for our real estate litigation, he said, "I'll even do it on a contingency." So I'll take 30%. You just pick up $600,000 for nothing. But see, people don't like lawsuits. When you get into a lawsuit, it's stressful, and even if you're on the right side, it's it weighs on you. So there's a psychological cost as well. But yeah, you could. There's no reason that the guy should not be doing the inspection. He could still take the subject off and not do the inspection, but to not take the subject off and not do the inspection, that's like saying, I don't have financing, but I never applied to the bank for financing. So again, that's a misuse of the subject condition.
From your perspective these days, have you find a lot of deals the buyer not being able to close on the deal?
Not as many as I would have thought. There's been a few, some on some pre-sales, where the person bought several years ago. I had one just very recently where the person had a 2% mortgage locked in April last year. And then of course the rates kept going up and up and up, and the developer didn't finish. So this is a problem. The developer was delayed. This guy's interest rates going up like this. By the time we could close in November, he had to go to a private lender and pay 10% on the mortgage. So that's one of the risks of pre-sales. If you guys are ever doing pre-sales, you want to talk to your clients, say, here's the risk. So make sure, a lot of people buy pre-sales, but one of the big risks is this long closing period. It can be a year, it can be 2 years, and it's a moving target. So if you check on our blog, on our website, we've got a couple of articles on pre-sale risks. Again, not to say don't buy it, but if you do buy it, know what the risks are. That's one of them. But yeah, it's not really as many people couldn't close as what I would have thought. But again, this could be more of a factor if the interest rates stay high for another year or two. My guess is they'll start coming down later this year, but
Everybody's kind of saying the same.
and the banks are saying the same too, because if you look at the bank rates for 1 and 2 year mortgages, they're super high.
Yeah.
The bank does not want you to take a 1 year mortgage. They want you to take a 5 so you can overpay for the last 3 years.
All good.
So anything else, guys? We're good? Okay.
I have a bit of a layered question. I'm a bit perplexed about like the rescission law being passed versus the no rental law on strata is being passed, because it seems like the rescission, that needed to happen a year ago, but it didn't get implemented until Jan 1. Whereas I don't remember seeing any legislation on or any announcements on the fact that there was going to be a ban on restrictions on strata for rentals, and that happened overnight. So I'm just perplexed at how those laws, what
Levy came into office and changed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like so that happened overnight, but then why wasn't the rescission
Well,
happen?
you-
Why didn't that happen?
Well, you could argue the rescission thing was a complete waste of time, just
Yes.
optics, because since 2010, developers have been able to file these things called rental disclosure statements. So invariably, they all said, full rentals for 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, which means that any rental bylaw wouldn't have any effect anyway, restricting them. So anything over 2010, there was no rental restrictions anyway. So all this law that EB put in only affects the older units. Okay, because the other ones already had no rental restrictions.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's just optics. So, oh yeah, we're going to help all these rentals. Well, first of all, they didn't help anyone's rental. If I bought in an older building because I wanted rental restrictions, because I don't want other tenants in my building, now you've taken away my rights.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? There's
Yeah.
all the newer stuff, there's no restrictions anyway. So like I said, the developers all put in 100 years, 500, I've seen 1,000 years. Now you can't do anything for 1,000 years. Well, okay. So who are you helping? You're just helping some people in the West End who maybe live in an old building and they don't want rentals. Now they have to have rentals. So this is just nonsense. The rental thing was just garbage.
Yeah.
But so many things governments do now are just for optics.
Yeah.
You can look at the empty homes tax. You know, that's supposed to make all the properties available in Vancouver. Still very low rental rates, still very high rentals in terms of cost. Same thing with spec tax. So all these things they do, they don't do anything. They don't accomplish much, but they don't take them out. Once they're there, they're there.
So they collect the money.
They collect the money.
Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, you know, it is what it is. You know, we could be in a worse country for sure. You know, there's like 200 countries or 220 countries in the world. Canada is still one of the best ones. BC is still one of the best provinces in Canada. We just had a different government. So anyway, any other questions?
Just don't take any.
I think we're good, Ken.
We're good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Ken.
Pleasure as always.